Some connections begin long before we ever learn someone's name. Call it coincidence, call it intuition, call it fate if you're feeling brave. But tonight, we follow those quiet unseen lines that tug at our lives. Those invisible threads that pull people toward one another, shape our timing, and weave the stories we're meant to live. Because sometimes, the most powerful forces in our lives are the ones no one else can see. Hello, curious souls. Welcome back to the LilWeird podcast. I'm Jane, your curator and storyteller for tonight's Wander into the Strange and the Wonderful. We are now entering 12 Weird Nights, our special year-end mini-series. Every episode unwraps a piece of December's quiet magic. The mysteries we feel, the stories we inherit, and the questions that follow us into the new year. Tonight, we begin with the threads, the unseen ones that stitch our lives together. Welcome to the Night of Invisible Threads. If you think about it, humans have always tried to explain the strange ways we are drawn to certain people, why some lives cross ours with perfect timing, and why others feel connected even from a distance. Long before psychology, before neuroscience, before any scientific language existed, our ancestors used stories to make sense of these invisible pullings. Tonight, we visit three of them. There's a belief in East Asia that every person is born with an invisible red thread tied to the pinky finger or ankle. This thread stretches across time and distance, linking you to the people who will matter most in your life, the ones you are destined to meet. It can tangle, stretch, twist, and take detours, but it will never stop. So, if you ever look at your pinky finger and notice that tiny crease at the joint, some East Asian folklore says that where the thread begins, a red invisible cord tied from you to the people destined to shape your life. The tale is believed to originate from ancient China, later carried into Japan. Its earliest form involves the god of marriage, or Yue Lao, an old man of the moon who carries a book of marriages and red threads. According to the myth, Yue Lao ties a red thread between two people who are meant to meet. They may be separated by distance, culture, time, or circumstance. But no matter what happens, the thread will always bring them together. In Japan, the concept evolved into Akai Ito, literally the red thread. So why red? In China, red symbolizes life or protection. It's the color used for weddings and lucky charms. So the thread isn't just about romance. It's about fate guiding relationships of all kinds. But what makes the thread special? The thread may tangle, may stretch, may get messy, but it never breaks. This part of the myth is my favorite because it mirrors the reality of human relationships: beautiful, complicated, imperfect, but strangely persistent. Modern retellings often simplify it as soulmates, but the original myth is broader. Your red thread may be tied to a mentor, best friend, a rival, a person who changes your path, a child you haven't met yet, or a stranger who will one day save your life. The thread isn't about who you love, it's about who you're meant to encounter. So let's talk about Akai Ito in modern culture. You see the red thread symbol in Japanese dramas, anime, K-drama metaphors. It's one of the world's most enduring symbols of destiny. Now, let's move to Greece. If East Asia imagined invisible strings tying souls together, the ancient Greeks imagined life itself as a thread, spun at birth, measured through time, and finally cut. At the heart of this belief were the Moirai, or the Fates. Clotos spinning your thread into existence, Lachesis measuring how long it will be, and Atropos cutting it when your story reaches its end. They weren't evil, they weren't good. They simply maintained the balance of the universe, one thread at a time. Now, if you've seen the Netflix series The Sandman, you might remember the kindly ones. That unsettling trio who appear as Mother, Maiden, and Crone. And honestly, at first, I also thought that they were the Fates. Or maybe even Hecate, who is sometimes shown in a triple form at a crossroads. But here's the twist I learned. They look similar, but they are absolutely not the same. The kindly ones, also known as the Erides or the Furies, are ancient spirits of vengeance, consequence, and moral justice. They don't weave your fate, they enforce what your choices have set in motion. And Hecate, she's a powerful goddess of magic, liminality, and crossroads, sometimes shown with three faces. But she's a separate deity altogether. Three different powers, three different kinds of threads, three different ways the unseen shapes our lives. And now we return home to the Visayas, to the island of Panay, where fate was written not on thread, but on a tree reaching into the heavens. So here's what the legend says. Sidapa was said to dwell on Mount Madja-as, one of the most revered mountains in pre-colonial tradition. There, towering over the mountain slopes, stood the tree of lifespans. Each time a child was born, Sidapa would carve mark into the bark, a line indicating how long the child would live. When the child's life reached the mark, their time in the mortal world would end. It's not destiny in the romantic sense, but destiny in the cosmic existential sense. This myth shows how early Visayans understood mortality, the limits of life, the certainty of endings, and the sacredness of time. And placing this tree on a remote mountain makes sense. Mountains across cultures are thresholds between earth and sky, mortals and gods, the known and the unseen. The legend paints fate as something tangible, measured, rooted in nature, and that makes it uniquely Filipino. We didn't imagine threads in the air, we imagined fate held in the trunk of a tree, guarded by a deity and the land itself. Across continents and centuries, humans return to one image again and again. A line, a thread, a mark, a path, a connection that begins before we understand it. Whether tied around your finger, measured by goddesses, or carved into the bark of sacred tree, the message is the same. We are connected in ways we cannot see. But what about the connections we do feel today? The coincidences, instincts, and moments that feel strangely timed. Let's step into those next. Invisible threads aren't only found in myths. There are real life situations, documented, studied, and consistently observed, where a human connection appears to operate beneath conscious awareness. Here are a few examples that illustrate how these threads show up in everyday life. First is the interpersonal synchrony. This is when two people spend time together. Their bodies and brains begin to align automatically. Studies show that we unconsciously synchronize through breathing patterns, blinking rates, posture and gestures, speech rhythm, even heart activity. This broader phenomenon is called interpersonal synchrony. It's one of the strongest indicators of human connection, and it happens without people noticing. So, is this the same as body mirroring? Well, not exactly. Body mirroring is one form of synchrony, but it's not the whole picture. Body mirroring is when you unconsciously copy someone's posture, gestures, or expressions. It's visible, intentional or not, and linked to empathy and rapport. While in interpersonal synchrony, it includes mirroring but also syncing breathing, heart rate, micro movements, and speaking patterns. It can happen even when bodies aren't mirroring each other at all. Think of it like this. Body mirroring is matching movements, while synchrony is matching rhythms. Mirroring is what you see. Synchrony is what your body and brain quietly coordinate in the background. Researchers see this as one of the clearest explanations for why certain interactions feel effortless, why you feel in sync with certain people, and why silent moments can feel naturally comfortable. You can see this in family members, like if you talk to them or if you interact with them, you feel as if they are of the same people. Even friends, sometimes you get how your friends speak or their mannerisms, their actions. That's what interpersonal synchrony is all about. Even when you're not with them, you subconsciously mimic how they are. And second is the right time message. Many people have experienced a moment when they were thinking of someone and that person suddenly contacted them or show up the next day. Psychologists call this thought triggered coincidence. And it is one of the most frequently reported forms of meaningful synchronicity. Researchers behind the Coincidence Project note that these moments often feel uncanny because They happen when emotional importance is high. For example, when you urgently need someone or when your mind is already tuned to them. I actually experienced this firsthand. Years ago, my cousin and I went to the mall back when free Wi-Fi wasn't common and neither of us had mobile load or data that time. And we needed someone at home to call us because we had to tell them something important, but we had no way of reaching out. Then my cousin suddenly said, just think about him really hard. Sometimes they call when you're thinking of them. And it sounded ridiculous, but we tried it anyway. We literally paused in the middle of the mall and focused on that one person. Not even a minute passed, the phone already rang, and it was him. At the time, it genuinely felt like we summoned a phone call using mental Wi-Fi. But psychology explains it through hyperfocus during emotionally charged moments or memory exaggerating meaningful timing. Still, it's these personal stories that make coincidences feel like invisible threads. Because they tend to appear when we most need them. Curious to know if it works? Try it sometime and let me know if your mental Wi Fi ends up dialing someone too. And the third one is nighttime attunement in parents. Parents and caregivers commonly wake up a moment before a baby cries, sometimes even before any noise is made. Researchers attribute this to heightened vigilance, sensitivity to micro cues, hormonal attunement, learned sleep patterns. This is called nighttime attunement, and it demonstrates how human biology adapts to social bonds. It's one of the clearest examples of how connection influences behavior beneath conscious awareness. Next is shared thoughts, simultaneous speech, and the psychology of flow. Many people have experienced a moment where they and another person say the same thing at the exact time, or they think of the same idea before anyone even speaks, or they just know what the other person is about to say. Cognitive science explains this partly through shared schemas. But another major explanation comes from a concept explored deeply in Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book Flow. So, what is flow? According to Csikszentmihalyi, flow is a mental state of complete absorption. It happens when your attention is fully focused. You're neither bored nor anxious. The challenge matches your skill. Your self-consciousness drops and your sense of time shifts. In flow, your mind becomes efficient, predictable, and streamlined, processing information in a smooth, uninterrupted way. How does flow create invisible cognitive threads? Flow doesn't only occur during creative work or intense hobbies. It can also happen in deep conversations, collaborative work, or shared problem solving. When two people enter a flow state together, several things happen. First is aligned attention. Both people focus on the same task or topic with similar intensity. This shared focus narrows down the mental possibilities, making it more likely for both brains to produce the same idea at the same time. Second is the predictive synchronization. In flow, your brain becomes better at predicting patterns. If you and another person are reading the same cues, your predictions will often match, resulting in identical thoughts, comments, or insights. Third is reduced self-interruption. In flow, you don't overthink or filter your thoughts. Words and ideas come out naturally. If two people are both in flow, they don't hesitate. They speak the thought immediately, often colliding mid-sentence. Fourth is the emotional harmony. Flow tends to happen when people feel safe, relaxed, and fully immersed. Social psychologists say this promotes rapport, which strengthens the likelihood of synchronized cognition. So, why do shared thoughts feel magical? Because flow hides the mechanical explanation. Two brains working efficiently, attentively, and in sync produce identical outcomes more often than we realize. But since the process is internal, we only notice the moment the worlds collide. And that's the part that feels uncanny. In reality, it's a natural side effect of immersion, attention alignment, shared emotional states, and parallel cognitive processing. Flow makes it easier for two minds to use the same mental track, which is why it feels like your thoughts are connected by an invisible thread. And lastly is recognizing a stranger you've never met. Another commonly reported invisible thread moment is the strong sense of familiarity when meeting someone for the very first time. Even without any actual shared history, people sometimes feel instantly comfortable or strangely connected to a complete stranger. Psychology explains this through implicit memory activation, where your brain identifies a small similarities between this new person and some from your past. Your emotional memory reacts quickly, creating a sense of familiarity before your logical mind catches up. But culturally and experientially, people use different names for this phenomenon because it feels bigger than a simple brain glitch. Across different traditions and belief systems, experiences like this are often labeled as serendipity, a meaningful coincidence that feels intentional, or the most popular one, deja vu, a sense that you've already lived this moment. Whether you interpret it through psychology or spirituality, the sensation is the same, a sudden, intuitive familiarity that arrives before any facts do. Researchers note that these impressions serve an evolutionary purpose, helping us quickly assess trust, danger, or compatibility. But for most people, these moments feel personal and uncanny, as if an invisible thread was already there before the introduction. These examples show that humans constantly respond to one another through signals we're not fully aware of, from synchronized breathing to shared predictions and implicit memory. In the next part, we look deeper into the psychology behind these invisible mechanisms, how the brain notices, filters, and connects information in ways that feel intuitive, coincidental, or even fated. If the previous part gave us real life examples of strange human connection, this part explains why our brains create these moments and why they feel so personal, meaningful, or even eerie. Invisible threads aren't mystical by default. They are often the result of a deep psychological mechanisms that help humans survive, bond, and navigate the world. Let's break down some of the key psychological forces at play. First is the pattern recognition. Our brain loves connections, and humans are wired to search for patterns, even patterns that don't technically exist. This is called apophenia, the tendency to find connections in noise, and it's the same reason we see shapes in clouds or faces in electrical outlets. In social contexts, pattern recognition helps us interpret people's intentions, anticipate danger, identify allies, and detect emotional cues. Which means when a coincidence happens, our brains highlights it because it fits our instinct to connect the dots. This explains why invisible threads often show up during emotionally charged moments when our brains are already searching for meaning. Second is selective attention. We notice what matters. When we care about something or someone, our attention automatically sharpens around them. This is why you spot a friend's name on a long list, or you think about someone more when they are important to you. Selective attention also explains why we remember the uncanny coincidences but forget 100 times nothing unusual happened. It's not that threads appear only sometimes. It's that our mind highlights certain moments based on emotional relevance. Next is implicit memory, recognition before awareness. Implicit memory refers to the information stored in the brain that influence us without conscious recall. This is why a stranger may feel familiar, or a place you've never been to feels right. Our emotional memory often reacts faster than our logical mind. This can create the sensation of, I know this person, without knowing why. This is one of the psychological foundations of experiences, often labeled as deja vu, soul recognition, karmic encounter, or even past life meeting. The feeling is real, even if its roots are invisible. Next is brain prediction, how we know things before they happen. Modern neuroscience shows that the brain is constantly predicting what someone will say, how a situation will unfold, the emotional tone of a conversation, or even the behaviors of people we know well. This predictive processing makes us feel like, I knew you were going to say that, I knew you were about to call, or I had a feeling this would happen. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it isn't, but the accuracy sticks in memory. When predictions align perfectly with reality, the moment feels eerie, like a mental thread pulling tight across time. Next is social bonding. Why connection feels electrical. Psychologists studying social attunement found that strong relationships create faster neurological responses. Empathy produces mirrored brain activity. Shared experiences form shared interpretations. Bonding sharpens prediction accuracy. And this is why friends finish each other's sentences. It's the psychology of connection, the invisible relationship architecture built inside the brain. And lastly is meaning making, the human need for story. At the heart of it all is this. Humans interpret experiences through stories. When something feels coincidental, timely, or powerful, we instinctively look for meaning. This is why invisible threads resonate across cultures. From red strings of fate, the threads of destiny, the shared dreams, the psychic coincidences, to serendipitous meetings. Psychology doesn't erase the magic, it simply shows that the magic often begins inside us. When you put all these mechanisms together, pattern recognition, selective attention, implicit memory, predictive processing, and social bonding, you begin to see how humans are built connect in ways that feel almost supernatural. Up next, we look at how these threads show up in modern science, experiments, and real world studies. The places where researchers try to measure the intangible. If folklore gives us his stories and psychology explains our inner mechanisms, science gives us something just as interesting, the measurable patterns that suggest humans and even the universe itself operate through interconnected systems. Invisible threads may not be literal strings, but researchers across different fields have uncovered phenomena that show how deeply connected our biological, psychological, and environmental systems truly are. Let's break them down. First is the Coincidence Project, led by psychiatrist Bernard Bateman. The Coincidence Project collects thousands of reports of unusual coincidences, such as running into a person in unexpected places, or shared dreams, or simultaneous insights. They categorize these experiences into patterns such as simultaneous events, or serial coincidences. Bateman's main idea is simple. Humans are much more interconnected than we assume, and coincidences reveal the structure of those connections. His research doesn't claim magic, but it does show that humans operate in overlapping psychological and social networks that produce statistically rare yet meaningful moments. Second is the entanglement analogies, inspired by quantum physics, but without overpromising. Some researchers like Lean McTaggart in the field draw parallels between human connection and quantum entanglement, where particles remain linked across distance. But just an important note, scientists emphasize that we cannot literally apply quantum physics to human psychology, but as an analogy, it's useful. McTaggart's core idea is that the universe might be built on hidden networks of energy and information. Her research touches on intention experiments, group consciousness effects, coherence between participants, and shared physiological patterns during collective focus. While controversial, these studies open conversations about how group intention creates measurable outcomes, like synchronized heart rhythms and shifts in mood states. Third is the collective attention and social contagion. In sociology and cognitive science, collective attention refers to the way groups react almost simultaneously to the same stimulus. Examples of this are audiences gasping at the same moment or crowds moving as one. This demonstrates that emotions and reactions can spread invisibly, traveling faster than conscious processing. It shows that humans respond as systems, not isolated individuals. Fourth is the physiological linking. The body responds to relationships. Scientists studying romantic partners, close friends, and parent child pairs found that their bodies synchronize during stress, calm, laughter, storytelling, and decision making. Their heart rates shift together, their hormone levels respond in parallel, and their micro movements reflect one another. Invisible threads aren't metaphorical here, they're biological. And lastly is shared mental models, how people think alike. In cognitive science, groups often develop shared mental models, which explain why teammates anticipate each other's moves, partners predict each other's thoughts, strangers bond quickly under pressure, families develop identical reactions, and long term friends think in parallel. These models make communication smoother and create the illusion that minds are connected. In a way, they are, through patterns, memory, and learned cues. When you gather all these scientific ideas, synchrony, mirror neurons, coincidence research, collective attention, they all point to the same conclusion. Human connection is not accidental. It's structural, built into the body, brain, and environment. But science can only explain part of the picture. There's another layer, the myths, symbols, and stories we create to make meaning out of these invisible connections. Which lead us to symbolic threads, why we tell stories about fate, destiny, and connection. Even with all the science, the psychology, the synchrony, the coincidence research, there is something else that keeps invisible threads alive in every culture. Our human need to create meaning. Invisible threads appear in ancient myths, rituals, creations, stories, folk tales, and epics not because our ancestors lack scientific explanation, but because stories gave them a framework to understand the complexity of human relationships. Let's break down why these symbolic threads exist everywhere. First is stories help us make sense of chance. Humans struggle with randomness. When events happen too perfectly, we instinctively look for patterns or purpose. That's why mythologists invented thread strings of fate, life threads controlled by the fates. Stories help ancient societies explain the unexplainable and help individuals feel less alone in their experiences. Invisible thread meets became a comforting structure for moments that felt too meaningful to be dismissed as coincidence. Second is symbols make connection feel tangible. Human relationships are abstract. You can see loyalty, affection, intuition, or attachment. So cultures created symbols. Threads, knots. These symbols give a shape to things we feel but cannot see. A red thread around a pinky, a life thread spun by a goddess, a lover's fate carved into a stone, a destiny written in the stars. All of this made the intangible feel touchable. Third is myths preserve emotional truths, not literal facts. Even if the stories are metaphorical, the emotions behind them are real. When the Japanese say two people are tied by the Akai Ito, they're expressing the belief that some relationships feel inevitable. When Greeks told stories about the Moirai, they were expressing the truth that life has beginnings, middles, and the endings beyond our control. When Filipinos spoke of the stars determining fate along the slopes of Madja-as, they were expressing the truth that destiny feels bigger than the self. Myths hold emotional realities that science doesn't always address. Fourth is third stories reinforce social bonds. Anthropologists say that fate stories help communities justify relationships, give purpose to unexpected encounters, and support choices in love or friendship. They turn social ties into cosmic ties, which strengthens social cohesion. We don't just meet people, we're meant to meet them, even if only for a moment. Then, humans also need a narrative for life's turning points. Invisible threads often appear during moments of transition, unexpected opportunities, sudden endings, sudden beginnings. People use thread stories to explain what feels too sharp or sudden. This friend came into my life at the perfect time. That accident changed everything. That person crossed my path right when I needed guidance. Or I feel like I was meant to be here. Threads give chaos a narrative shape. And lastly is modern media keeps the thread alive. Even today, we see the thread motifs everywhere. In romance dramas and K-dramas, fantasy novels, animated films, graphic novels, psychological thrillers, metaverse or simulation stories, the Sandman's Moira inspired characters, and everything everywhere all at once is multiverse strings. The thread survives because the symbol still works. We still feel connection we can't explain. We still feel coincidences that hit too precisely. We still meet people who change us instantly. And because we still experience these things, we keep telling stories about them. When I hear the phrase invisible threads, the first thing that comes to my mind is Taylor Swift's Invisible String. And I think many of us naturally connect that idea to soulmates or soul twins. This belief that two people were once the same stardust split into two, destined to find each other no matter how far they wander. When I was younger, I believed in soulmates wholeheartedly. I loved the idea that there was an invisible thread tying two people who shared the same soul print, and that eventually they would find their way back to one another. It was a romantic way of looking at the world, and I held onto it for a long time. Looking back, I realized I was more in love with the idea of a soulmate than the reality that connection, real connection, is both natural and intentional. It's magical, yes, and it's also a work, timing, and choice. But even now, I still find it fascinating how we met people who feel strangely divine. Not just lovers, but friends who feel like natural extensions of ourselves. The ones who enter our lives at the right moment, or in the most unlikely ways. And here's one thing I've come to understand: the people who truly matter aren't always the ones you choose. Sometimes, they're the ones who choose you. I'm 94% introverted based on my MBTI, so my closest circle doesn't even feel all 10 fingers. But I've never felt lacking. We don't talk every day, we don't see each other often, especially now that we live in different countries and even different continents. Yet, if there's such a thing as an invisible thread, theirs must be strong. Something that doesn't fray, doesn't rust, and somehow feels brand new. Throughout this episode, we explore the invisible threads from different angles: culture, psychology, science, symbolism, and we ask whether these threads are real, metaphorical, biological, or simply stories we tell ourselves. But when I reflect on it personally, what amazes me is how we meet people we were never supposed to meet. People who, statistically speaking, should have passed us by, yet somehow they become significant. So significant that even distance, time, and silence don't sever the connection. And if we're honest, invisible threads aren't always gentle or kind. What about the people who hurt us, wronged us, or left scars we didn't ask for? Are we connected to them too? Or were those encounters mistakes, wrong decisions, things we should have walked away from sooner? Maybe, maybe not, but I've come to believe that every person, every event brings us something, whether it's something gained, something lost, or a lesson we didn't know we needed. And it's up to us to recover from the losses and make meaning from the mess. I also realized that people who are healthy for you will make you grow, and growth isn't always pleasant. It can be uncomfortable, it can hurt. So now I'm still figuring this out. Are the people who make me uncomfortable also good for me? Or are they simply passing lessons wrapped in temporary connections? And when it comes to romantic connections, it's funny how the right one often arrives when you're not looking. And when they finally appear, when the timing aligns, when the connection feels effortless, only then do you understand what the invisible thread is really about. And so tonight, we tug gently at the threads that weave us together. The threads you can't see but somehow feel. In a shared glance, a familiar voice, a perfectly timed message, or a stranger who feels like an old memory returning home. Maybe invisible threads are biological, maybe psychological, maybe mythical, or maybe they're the quiet language the universe uses when it wants two lives to intersect. Whatever they are, they remind us that connection, real connection, is the closest thing we have to magic. So, before you go, I want to leave you with one soft question. Who are the people in your life whose thread has never broken? No matter how far, how long, or how quietly you drifted apart. And if you had the chance to tug on one invisible thread tonight, whose name would be on the other end? Thank you for spending your night with me here on LilWeird Podcast. If this episode stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, a name, share it with someone you're connected to. It might just be the little nudge they need tonight. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow the podcast, rate it, or leave a review. It helps more curious souls find their way here. And if you want to support LilWeird and the stories we're building, you can visit my coffee page anytime. Until the next Fear Night, stay curious and stay connected.